Well, welcome to Aviation Consumer Live. It's part of the Best of What's New series here at Fire Crown. And I'm with John Zimmerman, CEO of Sporty's. At Aviation Consumer, a series of products that have always seemed to rank among the best is these Learn to Fly series. And airline wrecks aside, you and I seem to agree that we're not in the greatest of place when it comes to quality of flight training, or at least the quality of the students that the flight training community seems to be pumping out. Did I got that right, or what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think this is just two old guys being grumpy. I think we see the data out there that it's easy to forget. We went through an unbelievable training boom the last 5 years. We had the COVID crash when airline pilot hiring froze overnight and furloughs took off. But then all of a sudden, within 6 or 8 months, it came roaring back, and airlines were hiring at a rate we'd never seen before. And so the flight training industry, I think, really struggled to keep up with that. And probably, if we're being honest, some flight schools got a little more focused on speed of getting students through the process and a little less on the quality of what they were turning out. There was a while there, if you got 1,200 hours and you had a heartbeat, you could get an airline job. And so all the incentives were aligned around speed over quality. And I don't need to, suggest all flight schools are bad. There's lots of excellent ones out there, but it's natural. You cut a few corners. And I think you're starting to see that a little bit with anecdotal evidence. Talk to designated pilot examiners. They say that the quality of the average applicants maybe not as good as it was 5 or 10 years ago. And that's showing up in the results too. The average pass rate for practical tests has declined in the private pilot, for example, for the last 3 years. It's not dramatic, but 3 years in a row is enough for me to think there's maybe something going on there. So I think now that the airline pilot hiring market has kind of turned a little bit, we've normalized, maybe back to a more of a normal pre-COVID trend. It's a good time for us as an industry to really think about the training we're doing and how we can support pilots to be really great, confident, safe pilots, not just meeting the minimum ACS standards.
If you were to pinpoint a deficiency, where might you start? Just back from Florida, flying around for a few days down there, flying in at uncontrolled airports, and the traffic patterns are just atrocious. Boy, oh boy, what a mess. Get cut off in the traffic pattern and poor radio communications. I'm a traffic phobe, and flying down there in some of these traffic patterns, now I know why. So that's just one example of where we might be seeing some deficiencies, but what else are you seeing?
I think there's probably two that come to mind for me right away. One sort of a skills issue and one more of a mindset issue. On the skills side, I think there's a little bit of a lack of stick and rudder proficiency, and that a lot of that just comes with practice, right? Nobody's born knowing how to do a crosswind landing. And if you're trying to zoom through training as fast as you can, maybe you have a few less lessons where you're really working out the ins and outs of, nailing your airspeed on final, really being in control of the airplane when you get into the round out and flare. So I think most examiners would say that's a weak point. I think the bigger one, and I've heard this from multiple instructors and examiners, and we hear it here at Sporty's, is maybe a fuzzier concept, but really important, which is the concept of being pilot in command. And really that PIC mindset that I'm in charge of this flight. I have to make all the decisions. I have to do the pre-flight planning. I have to be aggressive with the controls when I need to. I need to have my head on a swivel in the pattern. Just all those little things that add up to really being PIC. And I think that's something that maybe we're not doing as great a job of. Some of that comes with confidence. So I think there are things certainly flight schools and flight instructors can do to help that. I think that's something we try to do at Sporty's as well with the home training. Just some of that PIC mindset comes from having confidence and having the knowledge that I understand the weather, or I understand how the traffic pattern works, or I know what to expect from air traffic control on the radio. And I think if you're confident and you feel like you have the knowledge, it's easier to have that strong PIC mindset. And that really does trickle down to everything in flying. So that would be my big header if we had to pick one thing.
Yeah. So how about, pilots that get more experience and then they become airplane owners? And, as you know, over the years, Aviation Consumer, we've got the used aircraft guide, and part of the used aircraft guide is sifting through the NTSB rec reports. For every aircraft we cover every month in Aviation Consumer, we look at 100 of the most recent accidents that make the NTSB reports. And as you know, we cover all kinds of airplanes. And one thing that we're consistently seeing is what I think is poor judgment, from running out of fuel to just doing crazy, stupid things in an airplane. How do you teach judgment? Because that pilot gets more experienced into aircraft ownership or stepping up to more advanced airplanes.
I think that's the hard part. I think a lot of that is what you might call on-the-job training. You learn good judgment by seeing good judgment in action. It's kind of hard to get that from a book. There are certainly things that you can learn that help that in terms of the book knowledge, but a lot of that needs to come from on-the-job training. So to me, that means mentoring. And that a mentor doesn't have to be a 25,000-hour ATP. A mentor could be a 250-hour brand new flight instructor, but who's had some cross-country experience and has something to pass on. So I always encourage people to find some type of aviation mentor. And again, don't automatically look to the oldest, most experienced pilot at the airport. Just look for somebody who's down the path a couple years ahead of you, because I think there's a lot you can learn, even just flying with them. And I mean, even flying in the right seat. Some of my most educational flights as a new pilot was riding right seat, turning the radios for an experienced pilot in an airplane I had no idea how to fly, but I learned so much by watching somebody else do it. So I do think that's a culture thing in aviation we could all do a better job of, is just passing on some of that good judgment that you see in action every day when you learn from somebody who's got more experience.
I've done the same thing, flown right seat with really good pilots, some of the best I've flown with in all the years I've been doing it. And at least some of it has stuck. At least I hope to think it is. Let's dive into some of the Sporty's products. Years and years and years, the Sporty's catalog has been coming through, and anybody that's been doing it as long as you and I have knows it's a staple in the market. But we've been watching the Sporty's training courses evolve, and as I said at the beginning, it's not just learn to fly. There's lots of specialty courses, which in Aviation Consumer, each time we review them, they're usually right up at the top. We just like them more and more the more you advance these things. Tailwheel checkout with Patty Wagstaff. Learn the secrets to safe tail dragger flying. What strikes me there is something going on in the insurance market that we've sort of been covering ad nauseum. We've got an insurance market that's targeting older pilots, and a lot of those pilots fly tailwheel airplanes. How can the tailwheel checkout with Patty Wagstaff help a pilot moving up into a tail dragger?
Yeah, here's one where it may sound like I'm contradicting what I just said, but I actually think I'm not. Here's one where a little bookwork can help. So much of tail dragger flying is tribal knowledge that's passed down, and that's great. Like I just said, mentoring is really important. But sometimes because the tail dragger is a flight instructor checkout and not a check ride, there's no written test, that can occasionally fall into the pencil whip territory, and I see mostly bad habits passed down. So I actually think a little more structured approach to tailwheel flying, as basic as it sounds, a little bit of an understanding of the aerodynamics. Why does a tailwheel airplane want a ground loop? What's that all about? What is the proper recovery from a bounce? Why is a wheel landing the right answer sometimes? There is an academic side to that I think if you understand at a gut level there, can help that tribal knowledge actually sink in. And sure, tail dragger flying, there's no substitute for going out and doing it and getting in the repetitions. But this is one where I sometimes think we shortcut the bookwork, because it's feel and it's stick and rudder, but that doesn't mean there's nothing to learn about why you're doing what you're doing. There's a lot of physics and aerodynamics there that people sort of take for granted.
Yeah. And one step further is Patty's basic aerobatics course with Patty Wagstaff, how to improve your stick and rudder skills with tips from a legend, aerobatic pilot. How'd that come to be?
We've had a great relationship with Patty. Obviously somebody who needs no introduction. So when she said, hey, I want to start passing on some of my knowledge, the answer was obviously yes. Many people maybe don't realize she runs a very active flight school in Florida, teaching tailwheel and aerobatics. So she's been instructing in this for years and years and years. And we really thought there was a great opportunity to get that legendary pilot skills passed on to a broader audience. Aerobatics in particular is one. This is the ultimate example of the cliche that the cockpit of a small airplane is the worst classroom on earth. And it's true, because if you're upside down pulling 3 Gs, it's pretty hard for that to sink in. And a lot of times the best learning happens after the flight. You can go back and review it. So this is something Patty said for years, that it's really hard to make that cockpit of an extra 300 or a decathlon the classroom. And so here's one where she thought I can demonstrate it. And we did some fun things here with 360-degree cameras and multiple camera angles. So you can, pause a maneuver. We're going to do a loop. Let's look at what it looks like when we're 90 degrees nose up. And you can pause it and you can look left and see what that wingtip picture looks like. You can look at the stick position. You can look at the instruments. And that's where slowing things down really helps. And hopefully you show up for your actual aerobatics lesson, you understand a little bit more what to expect. If nothing else, you can be a little less intimidated, a little less afraid, and maybe in a better position for some of those lessons to stick. And Patty's a fantastic instructor. I mean, people know her as an airshow pilot, but she's just got a tremendous way of teaching that is low stress and calm, but obviously fully in control at all times. So she's a fantastic instructor.
Yeah, and back to these products, real high quality. I mean, as you talked about video, 4K video, multiple camera angles, and these aren't very expensive in the scheme of things. $150 for each one of those courses. But these courses expand into other areas, right? You've got your flight review course, which you say is a perfect course for the rusty pilot. A course for IPCs, instrument proficiency check. VFR communications for towered and non-towered airports, IFR communications, multi-engine training courses, aviation weather courses. Common theme among all these?
We just love flying and we love teaching flying. And so we don't want to restrict that to just private pilot and instrument rating. Obviously, that's our core. That's we care about that deeply. But we think one of the most rewarding things in aviation is to add new ratings and learn new skills. Some people have this goal that they're not going to get a flight review for 20 years. They're just going to keep adding ratings. And obviously that's sometimes limited by budget or time, but I think that's really a great thing. Even if you don't regularly fly a tailwheel or aerobatics or seaplanes or gliders, you can learn an awful lot just as a Cessna 172 or a Bonanza pilot by adding those ratings. So we really care an awful lot about that. And so we're continuing to do that. We're working on some new stuff in that category right now. So it's something we really, if nothing else, it's fun. And that's why so many of us are in aviation, is to have some fun.
And last, for the What's New department here, you guys had a big announcement just a couple of weeks ago with pilot workshops, another outstanding area. How that come to be, and what advantage does that give Sporties?
Yeah, it really completes what we talked about. We want to continue to build beyond that initial training of private instrument, commercial. We really want to offer a full suite. To us, training is not an event. It's not just a check ride. It should be a habit. It should be a continuous thing that you're always working on proficiency. You're never done with proficiency. And so Pilot Workshops model is really an ongoing monthly training experience. Their IFR and VFR Mastery is their signature product. And it's a great scenario-based, interactive, monthly training product that really is all about keeping your skills sharp. It's not about a check ride or a written test. It's about being safe and confident. And they're great people and they have great products. And we worked with them for a little while and decided, this is kind of a classic 1 + 1 = 3 here, that if we can combine Pilot Workshops and Sporties, then we think we've got just world-class training all the way from that initial private pilot check ride, all the way through the 30,000-hour ATP who wants to stay current and proficient. It's just the perfect complement. So we're really excited about it.
And really good materials too. One of my favorite, there's a series of manuals, Pilot Workshop manuals, and these are fairly sizable books. One of my favorites is Airplane Engines, and the pilot-friendly manual for understanding engines. They dive really deep, and I think every pilot should own one because
I totally agree.
A lot of mystery.
We hand this out at Sporty's Flying Club. We have a Club 182, and nobody flies that airplane without reading that book because it is terrific and it's loaded with graphics and it's practical. It's not, reciting the manual or the legalese. It's really hands-on practical stuff for operating the airplane better. So I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, it even goes beyond engines. How ATC really works. Pilot's Legal Guide, which is sort of interesting. Emergency strategies. IFR procedures, VFR comm. So, and these manuals are anywhere from $60 to $70, and again produced to really, really high standards. Anything else in the training industry that you think we ought to talk about, John?
The only other thing I'll mention is another announcement we made recently is our partnership with Flight Schedule Pro, which really integrates our courses, especially on the primary side, with the flight school experience. So if you're training at a flight school, now you can finally connect your flight lessons and your syllabus at the flight school and all of your training events with your Sporty's home study course and your flight instructor. So now we really feel like all three legs of the stool are there, your flight instructor, the student, and the school. And we know from our flight school here at Sporty's, when those things are connected and you can really stay in sync with everybody, has tremendous training benefits. You save time, you save money, customers are happier, people take check rides earlier. So we're really excited about that partnership too, of finally kind of closing that gap between home study and the flight school experience.
You've been watching Aviation Consumer Live. I'm here with John Zimmerman at Sporty's. John, love what you're doing. Keep doing it. And thanks for coming on to talk with us.
Thanks for having me, Larry.